So I'm Norbert Meyn from the Royal College of Music, and today is the 29th of July 2014, and I'm here at Senate House Library with Bernard Keefe. Bernard is the chairman, the acting chairman still, of the Anglo Austrian Music Society. And this, we've already spoken in great length about the amazing history of the Anglo Austrian Music Society, and its sister society, the Anglo Austrian Society, is closely related to that. And both societies donated their archive to Senate House Library, and so we're here today to look at some items from this archive, which is incredibly fascinating. It's just the few randomly chosen documents here in front of me give us a fascinating glimpse of musical life in Britain since the war, since the Second World War, and of the contribution that the Anglo Austrian Music Society has made to musical life in Britain since then. So Bernard, let's have a look at some of the things in front of us. So first of all, here is a program of the Fledermaus by Johann Strauss, and this was conducted by Paul Hamburger, and it's a tour of concerts that this is from, which the Anglo Austrian Music Society put on, and you were in it. Can I just hand it to you?
Yes.
And tell us a bit about this tour and about Paul Hamburger as well, who
Yes.
the director.
Yes. Well, this was one of the tours that I did very early on, which is how I came to be connected with the Music Society. I took somebody's place who had dropped out, and it had developed into this, which is quite an elaborate production. But remember, there was no orchestra. It was two pianos. That was Paul Hamburger, very fine pianist, who was well known as a coach in London and as an accompanist, and Reynald Grissel, who's an Englishman. And we gave this performance of Fledermaus several places around the country, but always in major halls, the Free Trade Hall in Liverpool, and in Scotland, in the Usher Hall in Edinburgh. And it was all to very good audiences. It was a very profitable exercise. And I used to introduce it and sing a couple of parts as Frank, the prison governor, and Blint, Eisenstein's lawyer. And there were also two dancers that I knew very well, because I had met them in Japan. They had come up from Australia to tour with a pianist, Marcel Lorber, and I had sung Winterreise with Marcel Lorber's accompaniment at a German hostel for people who'd been wounded in the Hiroshima bomb. It was actually in Hiroshima. So that was an experience to see these two, and they came to live in London. And I think Bettina Vernon married an English I think in the Royal Air Force. He was an officer in the Royal Air Force. And Evelyn Ippen married, and so on. And so they were residents in London thereafter. And Marcel rather gave up playing the piano, and he became a great expert on Japanese netsuke. He was a collector and dealer in these tiny carvings, the Japanese. He took on that. He'd given up piano, made a lot of money from dealing in netsuke. So that was an intro for me. It was a mixture of people I already knew very well. And Ernest Frank was an old friend. And incredible to look at it now.
Here we have a letter from Benjamin Britten to Ferdinand Rauter, who was on the committee of the Anglo Austrian Music Society. Thank you for your letter. Peter Pears and myself were delighted and honoured to be able to perform for your society, which has done fine work, and hope to have the opportunity perhaps to do so again in the future. Now, tell us a bit more about this connection with Benjamin Britten and Peter Pears.
Well, as far as I know, because this was at a time when I was not really connected with the direction of the society. But the point was that we wanted always to present the finest performances we could of the great Austrian vocal works. And that, of course, were the two song cycles of Schubert. And so I think it was through this that we engaged Peter Pears and Benjamin Britten, because the wonderful thing about that performance, for me, was Benjamin Britten's playing of the accompaniments. To hear him playing the very first song in Winterreise, with all the repetitions, you know, the same verse over and over again, and the accompaniment sounded different. He played the accompaniment according to the words of each time. It was an extraordinary demonstration of the art of accompanying, not the craft. So that was how that happened, I think.
Here we've got a program of Ferdinand Rauter's performances with the singer Engel Lund. Mm-hmm. They did tours all over with songs of many lands. And we'd spoken about, tell us a bit about Ferdinand Rauter.
Well, Ferdinand Rauter was a wonderful musician. He was not by nature a concert pianist, but he was a very fine coach. And he wonderfully, because when he played an accompaniment of this sort of thing, of folk songs, it would be a different accompaniment every time, because he would be able to elaborate and develop it and create the interest in the accompaniment by his own invention. And they were a very much loved duo, and he was a lovely man, and his advice on the committee had always been very good, and he was very frank, you know, and very straightforward in his advice. But these performances were quite a unique effort. You know, one uses the word unique very loosely, but I don't think anyone has ever matched it because of you see from the list here, the songs of many lands, of Austria, England, America, France, Germany, Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and Jewish folk songs, a whole range. And they were presented in this freshness, which so often those sort of songs are performed in a very uninteresting way, but they were it was a very entertaining performance, and he was really responsible.
So here we have, we spoke about the fact that the Anglo Austrian Music Society brought over many established groups from Austria after the war. And here is a program from a charity concert by the Vienna State Opera in 1947, and I believe it was actually at Covent Garden.
Yes.
And there were performances of the opera Don Giovanni, and here we have a program of which shows the name of Richard Tauber.
Yes.
So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. This performance, a unique performance, really was. Perhaps diplomatically, Anton Desmontins decided he was too ill to perform that evening. And so word had got around that Richard Tauber, who knew the part very well because he'd often sung it in Austria and Germany, would like to sing it. And so Tauber stepped in and sang Don Ottavio, that one performance. And he died a few months later. It was a great farewell. Could be nothing more appropriate than Tauber. Most people, perhaps not today, his name perhaps has faded from memories, but in my time, Tauber was always known as a singer of light opera, of operetta in particular. And he composed them. Don't forget, Tauber was also a composer, and he wrote English operettas. And but we also, even then, those of us who enjoyed those operettas were not familiar with the fact that he had been a leading singer in the opera world in the 20s, a real star. And have you heard the recordings that somebody made in the wings of performances by the Vienna State Opera? fascinating recordings, just sort of 1 12-inch side at a time, they fade out. But what is so terrific, I think, and one of them includes Tauber, one of the marvelous things is the reaction of the audience. You know, we think that when you're going to perform Mozart or perhaps even Verdi or Weber, that the audience is going to be very serious and listen. But no, that audience, because the language, it was their language, they reacted with such enthusiasm and laughter and so on. It's a really joy to hear what a living thing the opera was in Vienna. And Tauber was able to bring that to that performance. I don't know if it was recorded, I don't think it was, but it was a tragedy if it was. But there he was, the last months of his life, and Don Ottavio is no easy ride. The first, you know, the two arias, one has got this very long run, and the other one needs a wonderful cantilena, a sustained line, and Tauber was a star for that performance.
To many members of the Anglo Austrian Music Society, Richard Tauber was an important figure.
Yes.
And after he died, they decided to start the Richard Tauber Memorial Scholarship. And here we have the original plan for the competition.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, the original intention, optimistically and financially, was that it should be awarded after preliminary auditions in London and in Vienna for young singers. And they weren't required to sing Tauber's repertoire. They would choose their own repertoire for the preliminaries, and if they were chosen to go into the final, they would sing then at a recital at the Wigmore Hall. And the judges would be top people in the profession, so it would be a tremendous boost for their careers. And of course, it was an occasion for many future stars to bring themselves before the London public and before the London critics. Unfortunately, in recent years, the cost of this has become so exorbitant for us. Very sadly, we've had to give up. It still survives, but it is part of the Wigmore Hall's own competitions. It is a prize in their singing competition. So it still lives, but it's now as a prize, not our promotion. But for all those years, you could look at all the names there, and very important. And it was a wonderful occasion. I was on the jury for 3 or 4 of the competitions, and it was, the preliminaries were sometimes, what shall we say, uneven, because you had to have singers who didn't win as well as the ones who did. But it was always interesting because young singers vary so much. But one thing is demonstrated, that the standard of singing in the last competition that we had, which included several British singers and some from Vienna, not only Viennese, but people studying in Vienna. It was widened to allow students who were studying in Vienna, who might not be Austrian, to take part. And the standard of some of the British singers was so much higher than it had been when I first was in the profession. There was an enormous development in professional skills, and competitions of this sort play a very important part in that challenge and urging them to study the leader.
Here is a Richard Tauber Memorial Concert.
Right.
That was at the Royal Albert Hall in 1948.
Yes.
Let's have a look at that.
Tauber was such a wonderful musician. The breadth of his skills. You know, there's a recording, a filmed recording of him accompanying himself on Schubert's songs. He's a very good pianist. He's a good conductor and composer. He wrote English operettas. A remarkable man. And I think this concert, with all these dedications, Bruno Walter, look at that, Elizabeth Schumann, these great artists recognized a fellow artist of the highest caliber. Look at that, and Franz Lehar. Wonderful. Now that, you see, it is interesting, Cochrane. Now who is Cochrane? He was a famous promoter of operetta. So it was the breadth of his A.P. Herbert. Now A.P. Herbert was an MP, an independent MP, I believe, and he was a writer of comic operas, and also he provided librettos sometimes for operettas. And Oscar Preuss, the gramophone company. Tauber's records, how many thousands and thousands of copies sold of that? Oh yes, that remembers a great artist. Oh, look at the singers, David Franklin. Oh yes, I knew him. And Schwarzkopf. Yes, it's, look at that. Adrian Bolt conducting. You wouldn't associate Adrian Bolt first time, would you? But here we are, look, in the operettas, it's George Melochrino, who was a famous light orchestra. He had his own light orchestra. So it covered the qualities that Tauber brought to musical performance. Walter Goehr, Walter Goehr, whose son Alexander Goehr is a composer of well-known, and two pianos as well, Hungarian Rhapsodist, Die Fledermaus. But that, of course, the great number was You Are My Heart's Delight. I believe in performances of Land of Smiles, he used to have to sing it 3 or 4 times, and he used to sing it in different languages. You know, he would sing it in German, and he would sing it in English. And it was quite extraordinary performance he would give, and he would give a different performance. Wonderful, a great diminuendo, you know, to little pianissimo, and then the second performance he would sing it full with a variety of interpretations. Wonderful performer.
Here's a concert conducted by Walter Goehr at the Royal Albert Hall of Viennese music in 1949. And it is in aid of the Richard Tauber Memorial Scholarship.
Yes.
And it featured Elisabeth Schwarzkopf.
Oh, yes.
Let's have a look here.
Yes. Wonderful. Hans Braun. He was a very renowned baritone of the time. And Walter Goehr. Goehr was a very, very good all-round conductor. And he had the skill for this kind of program. But you know, he was a leader in this country of the investigation of early music, of the music of the 17th century. And he was conducting, just to digress from this, he was conducting a concert or preparing a concert at the Festival Hall of such music. And Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, young man at the time, was the one of the guest singers. And it was Bach. And in the rehearsal, Fischer just sang very clearly, and Walter just stopped and said, "Are you going to sing like that this evening?" He said, "Yes." But he said, "You don't do anything. You just sing." We in Germany believe that Bach should be performed just as it's written down. No marks of expression there, remember, just as it's written down. And Walter said, "Oh, we British find that rather boring." So anybody who would talk back to Fischer-Dieskau was a brave man. So that was Walter Goehr, yeah.
Now here's a concert poster about a concert, again organised by the Anglo Austrian Music Society with the Amadeus String Quartet.
Yes.
Now, what do you remember about them?
Well, I remember, of course, that they offered chamber music, classical chamber music, to a degree of creativity which we had never heard before. That was incredible, a revelation really of a lot of the music, because they brought such understanding and care. The preparation that went into it was quite astonishing. And that put them, a British string quartet, to the leading quartet in the world, undoubtedly, because of their recordings and so on that they made. But this was an aspect of the work of the Anglo Austrian Music Society, that we worked so much and spent so much of the money on the promotion of music in a new way to the British audience. And I think that looking back, I think we could be very proud of what we did then in that way, because it was at the very highest level. You couldn't go higher for chamber music concert than the Amadeus String Quartet. And after all, they had been formed partly in a camp, wasn't it, for aliens during the war, after the war. But out of that came the Amadeus String Quartet. Wonderful.
So this is a program of Pierre Lunaire by Schoenberg and Façade, presented by the Anglo Austrian Music Society,
yes,
in 1958 in Oxford Town Hall. And Edith Sitwell was speaking, and Peter Stadlein was conducting and playing the piano.
Yes.
Could you tell us about him?
Peter Stadlein. Well, he was a very successful pianist, I believe, in his younger days, and then he came and settled in this country. He was a very studious and thoughtful man. He was a very good broadcaster. You know, he gave talks on the radio, which are very informative and illuminating. You know, he opened one's ears to the elements in a composition to a remarkable degree. He had been devoted to Schoenberg, but I gathered from him towards the end of his life, he did decide that 12-tone music was the wrong path, which is rather strange, isn't it? But there you are. On television, I had a discussion with him and Stockhausen, the modern Stockhausen, not the Julius Stockhausen, who was the great singer, but the composer. It was Peter Stadlein, and I was the sort of interlocutor between the two of them. And Peter was trying to get the logic, the musical logic, as opposed to the analytical and mathematical logic behind Stockhausen's compositions. But they agreed to differ, shall we say. Yes, now that's interesting, this Sonnets from the Portuguese, translated by Rilke. Wonderful combination, isn't it?
So this is a program from the Wigmore Hall from May 1960.
Yes. Yeah.
And another concert from the
Anglo
Austrian Music Society.
Look at that. It's a wonderful program. Wonderful program. Noel Barker, she had a fine voice. And Bruce Boyce, very good baritone. Yes, that's such an interesting program. Yes. Veles, he was still alive then, you see. I wonder what I can do about, this business of BBC recordings. The BBC hands a lot of them to the British Library. They have there's a library department of recordings. But somehow I think Veles's music and that interview ought to be with somehow it has something to do with Austria. If you go to, you have to have a reader's ticket to go to the library to hear these things. But I think Egon Vellis's views in that ought to be available somewhere else. But the BBC is so hot on copyright that I have a copy of that interview, you see. But you can't be. I don't think it'd be very, very difficult to. I was poor. Just to digress a little, but Tom Hemsley, who was a very good baritone, sadly had a stroke, and had to retire. But he had given a performance of Winterreise and other Lieder, and he wanted to make a record out of them so he could sell. And the BBC wanted to charge him £700 for the privilege of using his own performance. But that's their copyright attitude, I'm afraid.
Here is a nice photograph of a improvised six-hand performance in Vienna with Sviatoslav Richter, Demus and Badura Skoda on the keyboard, and we've got Badura Skoda and Jörg Demus here in a recital at the Royal Festival Hall, organised by the Anglo Austrian Music Society, and that was
piano duets again. Schubert, great composer of piano duets. All the marches we know they're orchestrated, but they were originally piano duets, and that andante is a wonderful sonata of Mozart, piano duet. Hindemith and Bizet. Nobody plays Hindemith anymore, do they?
And here is a program of a concert at the Royal Festival Hall, October 1978. The Golden Cities of Vienna and Prague. Very appealing concert program, and it's introduced and conducted by Bernard Keefe.
That's right. Yep. It's really, I think that audiences can be widened and their interest stimulated if they are given an insight into some aspect of a work. Not to say, oh, this work is in C minor and the second subject it modulates to E flat and things of that sort. No, you've got to get inside the work which will capture their imagination and reveal to them the potential expressiveness of music. And this is what I tried to do in a concert of this, as I did often on television, but talking to the audience before each work and just trying to guide their listening. That's really what it amounts to guide their listening to the elements which are easily found to be expressive. That's really what it amounts to find what the intention of the composer and the expressive elements are. And that's often easy to pick out. In the case of a work like the Dvorak here, the Nocturne. Now, this is a beautiful piece. I've conducted it several times, but just to persuade people perhaps not to think too much about that particular work, but to allow that to take over by its development, the way this very slow, soft, melodic development. And it's a beautiful piece. But you see, the problem usually is that you can't put a program, a work like that, into a concert at the festival hall. But here, marvelously, because we attracted the audience by saying the golden cities of Vienna and Prague, they come and they've come to enjoy the music. So we can put in that Notturno at Dvorak, and instead of doing yet another Brahms symphony or something of that, or Tchaikovsky. And the same with Vltava, of Smetana, and Slavonic, these wonderful short pieces, like the Slavonic dances. And yet here, We have a Schubert symphony, the beautiful Fifth Symphony, full of melodic invention and such winning charm. What have we got? And we've got a gallop and waltzes, Wiener Frauen and polka and the perpetual volley. I was always, mind you, I was very nervous about conducting Viennese waltzes. There is special quality to them, and I wouldn't say you have to be born in Vienna to know how to do it, but it is certainly an idiom which is a very difficult thing for us English composers, conductors to capture. So I did my best.
Well, thank you so much, Bernard. It's been fascinating to hear about your life and about the Anglo Austrian Music Society as well. There are so many more amazing documents in all these boxes here. I'm afraid we don't have time to go through all of them. Yeah. But on behalf of the Royal College of Music and on behalf of Senate House Library as well, who has kindly provided these documents, I would like to thank you very much for this interview, and I wish you all the best.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you.